We used to say it very simply. We didn't fight a revolution in this country to have militarized streets. No one wants soldiers on our streets. It's the biggest invasion of American freedom. I mean, that when you think of a free country, when you think of taking your kids to school, going to work, do you envision a neighborhood with military patrolling the streets? That's not who we are. That's why we fought a revolution. That's why we're a country of freedom.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Perry Bacon. I'm the host of New Republics Right Now. I'm honored to be joined by Khanna, a congressman from California, who I'm sure lots of folks know. He's been a strong progressive on a lot of issues. He's also just somebody who is like really trying to get out there. You know, the Democratic Party, I think, has a problem of not meeting people where they are. And I know Ro is traveling the country and really trying to understand why Trump won and what the party can do about that. So, Congressman, thanks for coming here.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on. Congrats on your new role at the New Republic.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Let me start by, we're going to come back to another subject eventually, but let's talk about this press conference you're having today. Talk about the press conference you're having and what the importance of it is.
It's about principle. It's about restoring trust in government. It's not partisan. It's patriotic. We have Thomas Massey. We have Marjorie Taylor Greene. We'll have 10 of the survivors. They have never told their stories before.
Survivors of Epstein, just to be clear to the audience. So.
Yeah, survivors of Epstein. And they're going to speak for the first time. And this is, by the way, this goes well before Trump. I mean, these women have been silenced. When Epstein first got his plea agreement and slap on the wrist, no one talked to them. They have not been able to tell their story. And I imagine it's going to be very harrowing and heartbreaking for many Americans to hear what happened to them. And all they're asking for is full disclosure for the full release of the Epstein files. All they're asking for is closure for them. And so I'm hopeful that when the American people hear these incredibly courageous women, that they will demand that their members of Congress sign the Massey Khanna Epstein discharge petition to force a vote. We've got 212 Democrats who will sign it. 4 Republicans have signed it: Thomas Massey, Lauren Boebert, Nancy Mace, and Marjorie Taylor Greene. We need 2 more to force a vote.
Okay. So we're gonna talk about foreign policy mainly in this conversation, just because I think that's an issue that hasn't been explored as much these last few months as we focus on what he's done domestically. So I want to start by talking about what's happening in Gaza right now. Like, whether we call it a genocide or not, there are civilians have been killed in a mass way for months now. Do you agree this is not just a partisan issue? This did not just start with Donald Trump, that the Biden administration should feel some account for what's happening there too?
Yes. I mean, there is moral complicity that we have. We've given Netanyahu a blank check. I supported Netanyahu, Israel's right after October 7th to kill the perpetrators of that horrific incident. But within months, they had done that. They had destroyed Hamas's battalions. It's been 2 years, and they have gotten funding from the United States. I voted about a year ago against the $14 billion. It was a difficult vote, probably the hardest vote I've cast in the United States Congress. I got enormous criticism at the time, but I didn't think that we should be funding the killing of children and civilians in Gaza. Over 60,000 killed. Even if some percentage of those are enemy combatants, it's still 3 times the civilian casualty in Ukraine, just to put it in perspective. 500,000 facing famine. I'm leading a letter. I get attacked by AIPAC every other day these days because I'm leading a letter to call for the United States to recognize a Palestinian state, demilitarized, not Hamas, a Palestinian state that recognizes Israel as a Jewish democratic homeland, something that 147 other countries have done. France is doing, Canada is doing, Britain's doing, Australia is doing, and yet somehow that position, a common sense human rights position, is considered out of the mainstream by some of these groups. And so I believe that the Democratic Party needs to stand for moral clarity and human rights in Gaza.
And is it clear right now you think we should stop funding or stop supporting Israel's military?
I do. I supported both of the Sanders amendments. I'm on Delia Ramirez's Stop the Bombs Act. We should not be providing military weapons that are being used today by Netanyahu to kill civilians. The two things that I think every Democrat should be for, the sort of basic moral test, is to support Sanders and Delia Ramirez's resolution that says no military weapons currently to Netanyahu that are being used to kill these civilians. The war could come to an end. And second, to make sure that we are calling for the recognition of a Palestinian state at a time that Ben-Gvir, Smotrich, and Netanyahu are literally trying to erase Palestinian identity by pushing people out of Gaza, by settling more lands in the West Bank.
And you're saying it's a moral test. You said two conditions here: a Palestinian state and ending the military funding for right now. Those are the moral tests in your view among Democrats.
They are, because they're the moral test for the world. They're the moral test that Macron is talking about, that Starmer is talking about, that Mark Perry is talking about. These are not just the nations of the global South. These are not just nations that faced colonialism or were victims of imperialism. These are now Western democracies that are saying this is the moment we have to recognize and see Palestinian humanity and Palestinian national aspirations. This is the time we have to stop the mass killing in Gaza.
Broadening out a little bit, I'm going to tell the audience, I hope you don't mind, that my understanding is Congressman Khanna is maybe considering putting his hat in the ring for 2028, and he's thinking about issues sort of broadly. So, in that context, talk about foreign policy generally. Like, what should the Democratic, like moving beyond Israel Palestine? Talk about kind of how you see where we should be going in our foreign policy.
I was very inspired by hearing President Carter give a sermon in the later part of his life in Plains, Georgia. I had the honor of interning for the Carter Center in 1996. I didn't have the wisdom of knowing that President Carter is this great statesman. I just wanted to see the Atlanta Olympics, and I thought, what internship can I get? And it later turned out that President Carter supported me when I ran for Congress in 2016. I was so honored. But President Carter said, we are the most important nation in the world. We're a superpower. We are the richest country. We have the strongest military. And that's a good thing to have the strongest military and to be the richest country. But wouldn't it be incredible if we were a superpower that other nations wanted to consult to bring peace? Wouldn't it be incredible if we were the superpower that world leaders look to stand up for human rights? I believe that the Democratic Party should stand for a human rights-based moral foreign policy, one that says that we will model what cohesive multiracial democracy with economic opportunity for all looks like in the United States, what pluralistic liberal democracy looks like, and we will support the human rights of nations around the world. We will support the move towards democracies around the world, not by military intervention, but through alliances, through leadership, through diplomacy, through statesmanship. And of course, we will have the military necessary to defend American interests, but not to overreach.
Describe what okay, so moral foreign policy. So put that in some specifics. Like what could that mean for our policy in Europe right now? What could that mean for our policy in Europe? Is to define a region of the country or the world.
But what it would mean, for example, in Europe would be that when you're standing next to Putin, you say, Mr. Putin, give back Ukraine its land, that Putin's invasion of Ukraine was wrong. You can't just invade another nation. But it also would mean that we do the painstaking work of diplomacy and statesmanship to try to bring that war to an end with a just peace. It means that we support NATO in preventing aggression. It means we pay attention to situations like the Congo. I mean, as you know, Perry, because you're a student of history, I mean, Belgian colonialism in the Congo was worse than the colonialism my grandfather faced as part of Gandhi's independence movement in India. Literally, King Leopold cut off limbs for people who weren't mining. Well, right now in the Congo, there is still a conflict between Rwanda's M23 and the current Congolese government, and it's over minerals. And we have tech companies in my district that are benefiting from those minerals, from that cobalt, from the lithium that's being mined there. We, as the United States, need to have a moral role in ending that conflict and have accountability for the iPhones we use, for the technology we use that is being done at the expense still of the Congolese. We need to be involved in the economic development of other nations. I mean, I could go on, but those are a few
Let me
ideas.
ask. I mean, George W. Bush had a foreign policy that's very focused on democracy. I think Biden, to some extent, talked about democracies versus autocracies. Is that kind of is promoting democracy everywhere something you think is important or fundamental, or is it more is that part of a moral foreign policy?
It is. I don't think we do it through military invasions, but
Sure.
I do think that it's a good thing to be for democracy. But it can't just be democracy saying, let's have elections. It has to be democracy with economic development. It has to be democracy with recognizing pluralism and understanding the importance of respecting different faiths. It has to be democracy that understands that the United States should be involved in appreciating the economic aspirations of other countries. Let me give Mexico a great example. I just met with President Sheinbaum. We have a tariff currently on tomatoes coming from Mexico. Not only is that hurting the United States and making tomato prices a lot more, we are really devastating Sinaloa, the region that grows tomatoes in Mexico. Now, why does this matter? By devastating Sinaloa, the drug cartels are basically recruiting young people, young men, instead of going into tomato farming to come and work for them. That is not a thoughtful, moral foreign policy that is basically hurting American consumers and at the same time not helping Mexico become the successful democracy that it can be.
About a year ago, I hate to be too critical, but a year ago, I heard a speech in which then nominee Harris pledged we would have the most lethal military in the world. I don't necessarily, I think we probably should have a lethal military, but I worried that was emphasizing the wrong thing. Like, what do you like when we talk about the military? Do you want a smaller military? How do you view what our armed forces role should be?
Well, I voted against every military budget since I've been to Congress because I don't think we should be spending 56% of our federal budget in on the military, especially when a lot of that money is not going to the troops. It's not going for our national security. It's going to defense contractors that have CEOs for making $5 million on average a year. It's going to defense contractors that have monopolies. I led the investigation into TransDigm and exposed just one of the companies that was fleecing the taxpayers, charging 1,000% more than they should have, and they refunded $16 million. That was a small sum of money comparatively, but it was the principle. We don't need a bloated $1 trillion defense budget. Do we need a smart defense budget that has modern technology of drones and attritable drones and AI and understands the way modern warfare will be fought? Absolutely, and we need that to keep us safe, but it can be done for a lot less money. The other thing is what I would emphasize. I want America to be known for helping the economic development. You know, Larry Summers, who I don't agree with everything, he says China says you get a bridge, and America says you get a lecture. We need to be part of uh, making sure that we're helping build alliances on economic cooperation. I want our ideas to go out there. I want our culture to be exported. I want our values to be exported, not just that people all they know about the United States is that someone in their country saw a bomb or a missile that was still there from some prior war.
Talk about the foreign policy of the last 6 months. You've hinted at tariffs, you've hinted at Putin, but like, what is if you were asked Donald Trump's foreign policy is bad? Here's why. What's your kind of response to that?
Donald Trump's foreign policy is the foreign policy that we used to have of kings. And I'm not saying Donald Trump was a king, but it's basically his whim. He wakes up and he says, "Okay, punish the people who offended me, and help the people who praised me." That's literally his foreign policy. When President Sheinbaum is more gracious, the tariffs go down. When Modi refuses to nominate him for a Nobel Prize, the tariffs go up. When Xi Jinping says something favorable, the tariffs go down. When Xi Jinping insults him, the tariffs go up. When Putin flatters him and says that the war wouldn't have happened if Donald Trump was president, then nothing happens in terms of standing up to Putin. When Putin offends him, then he says, "Okay, I'm with Zelensky." It is literally a foreign policy of whim.
Connect. I know you've been traveling the country a little bit. Connect, like, Trump just won this election. People care about gas prices. They care about food prices. That's what it seemed this election was about, kind of more pocketbook things. Is this pocketbook conversation that I think in New York City, we look at Mondani runs on affordability. That helps him win. Like, is there a connection between foreign policy and these sort of day-to-day concerns? I think foreign policy is important. How do we, in terms of like winning elections, how do
Yeah.
you make foreign policy matter to the average person in Louisville or Lexington or what have you?
Well, I think there are two different issues. The voter in Louisville may not care about the details of the border skirmish between India and Pakistan, or may not even be following how much of the Donbass Russia has taken over and what a just peace looks like. But the voter in Louisville certainly sees kids dying in Gaza and says, I want my country on the side of protecting kids, and I want my country on the side of morality, because that's who we are as a people. And so foreign policy matters in the sense of America's conception of our own selves. This goes all the way back to Henry David Thoreau. This goes back to Woodrow Wilson or FDR or Ronald Reagan. We want, as Americans, to be the good guys. We want to be the people that are standing up for human rights and good values. And in that way, I do think people vote in a fundamental way, because when you vote for president, you're voting for it's a sacred vote. You're voting for who embodies American values, both at home and abroad. On a more basic level, the tariffs have had an extraordinary effect. I was up with Senator Sanders. We did some rallies in Concord, New Hampshire, and Manchester, New Hampshire, and I did a week. I'm sorry, a few hours with coffee shops, and I've called for the repeal of the coffee tariffs. We don't grow coffee in the United States other than 1% in Hawaii, and I'm doing this with Don Bacon. Well, I talked to some of those small business owners in places like New Hampshire. They've had their costs up 20 to 30%. They're going out of business if these tariffs aren't repealed. One of the people showed me a board of the menu, all the coffee prices, and they had no prices. I said, how much are the costs? They said, we have to change it every day. So we have a board that we can change the prices every day. This is devastating to folks.
Last question. I don't love Hakeem Jeffries' comments about the National Guard coming to DC. It doesn't seem like there's a lot of urgency there. When a Democrat goes on TV and says the National Guard coming to DC is a distraction from gas prices, I want to throw something. That is bothersome to me. I think the military being deployed in cities is bad. I think some of the authoritarian theater stuff Trump does is still bad. Talk about how you view. Maybe I'm misunderstanding. I don't get what the distraction message is supposed to say. Like, help me understand.
I know.
I think the National Guard being deployed is bad. If I'm wrong, I'll be happy to hear about you from that.
We used to say it very simply. We didn't fight a revolution in this country to have militarized streets. No one wants soldiers on our streets. It's the biggest invasion of American freedom. I mean, when you think of a free country, when you think of taking your kids to school, going to work, do you envision a neighborhood with military patrolling the streets? That's not who we are. That's why we fought a revolution. That's why we're a country of freedom. And we should be talking not in language that is a jargon filled, National Guard and or crime, or we should just say, who wants the military on their streets? Do you really want that? I mean, the whole Fourth Amendment was saying that don't have the military in people's homes. It's not a far stretch from saying they're in your streets to they're in your homes. And I think that this is so fundamental to the Democratic Party. Here's the challenge. People say we can't just be anti-Trump. I agree. But the problem is that what we have to do is have a vision, and we have to have a vision that we're willing to fight for. And so part of that vision should be no militarized streets. So when Trump militarizes the streets, we say we're not anti-Trump. We're standing for freedom of people to live without the military suppressing their liberty. We should be for a country that believes that immigrants work hard and contribute, so that when Trump engages in deportation without due process and proposes things like the Lake and Riley Act, we shouldn't have 1/3 of the Democrats go and vote for that kind of thing. We should say that the compromise of human rights for some is the compromise of human rights for all. So when Donald Trump says, let's throw the trans community under the bus, we shouldn't have a parade of Democrats saying, yes, 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 let's join them. because in the swing states, they don't care as much about the specifics of every position. They care about whether they sense you have any soul, any conviction, any ability to stand for things that actually you believe in. And then we should stand for an economic vision. I call it an economic patriotism. People often say to me, Ro, we don't know what the Democratic Party stands for. I can answer very simply. The Democratic Party should stand for tackling the economic divides and economic inequality that is tearing this country apart. Our highest mission should be the economic independence and success of every family and every community. That should be our mission and positive vision. But we don't have to be anti-Trump to fight for our values that Trump is destroying.
I'm going to end there. I think that was a great answer, and I was inspired to hear it. Congressman, thanks for joining me. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Appreciate it, Perry.
Good to see you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
And thanks, everybody, for joining us.